sing it one more time. We're going to go like this, and we're going to go like this. All right? What a mighty God we serve. What a mighty God we serve. Angels bow before him. Heaven and earth adore him. What a mighty God we serve. All right. Thank you. You may sit down. And for Children's Church this month, I wonder what we're going to talk about. What's here? What's here? What time of year is here? What? Is it Christmas? That's right. It's Christmas. Who likes Christmas? Raise your hand. Who likes Christmas? Raise your hand. Christmas is so much fun. It's also a time for us to say, hey, world, since you're listening, we want to tell you about baby Jesus. And we don't know if he was actually, he probably wasn't actually born at this time of year. But you know what? It's a great opportunity to talk about baby Jesus. So I have something in this box that Zoe brought up here for me. What do you think it is? Any guesses? Y'all are afraid to guess because you know I bring weird stuff sometimes.
Baby Jesus?
That's a really good guess. Yeah, several years ago I had a box and we opened it and there was another box and then the next week we opened it and what was inside? Another box. No, I'm not doing that this year. But you remembered it. What is this? An angel. Angels, I'm going to hold it and you can look at it. There are several mentions of angels in this story. Yes, you may touch it. It's glass, so you have to be careful. And it's really cool because it picks up light. You did touch it, did you? I'll come back. So there are many stories of angels in the Bible, but there's quite a few at the birth of Jesus. Yeah. And we don't know that they looked like this. I'm pretty sure, I don't know. Anyway, so an angel came to a young girl named Mary. A little. That's right. Wednesday we made an angel out of paper, didn't we? So the angel that came to Mary, his name was Gabriel. Can you say that? Gabriel. And I think Mary, I don't know what she was doing, but she went, she's probably like, she was a little afraid. If you were sitting at your house hanging out and an angel just, boop, how would you feel? I would be a little like, okay, something big's happening. And the angel said, don't be afraid, Mary. Don't be afraid. You are special to God. You are so special to God, he's going to give you a pretty important job. You're going to have a baby, and you're going to name him Jesus. And he's going to do amazing things. In fact, he's going to be king. And Mary was like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not ready to have a baby. Are you ready to have a baby, Zoe? No. No, we're not. She wasn't ready. She was like, first of all, I'm not even married. And, I'm just not ready. And Gabriel said, it's okay. God's got it taken care of. And so that's the story about when Gabriel came to Mary. And Gabriel also went to others we'll talk about later. But he said, do not be afraid. And we can feel that too. We don't need to be afraid. Who's got us covered? God has us covered. So we don't have to be afraid. Yeah, we did make it out of paper. All right, sit down. And I'm going to tell you something else. You know what? You're special to God as well. He has a job picked out just for you. We know it's not going to be that you're going to be the mother of Jesus because that's already happened. But he has a job just for you. And you don't need to be afraid because he's going to be right there with you the whole time. So I want you to know that God thinks you're pretty special too. So we're going to sing a song that we're going to sing this month. I've done it before. And while we sing it, we rock the baby. Can you all rock a baby? Savior, Savior, Savior of the world. The Father has sent his Son to be the Savior of the world. Savior, Savior. Shh. 1 John 4:14. Who does this go to?
Okay, there's a lady who lives in Fort Worth who likes to write music. Her name is Twyla Paris, and she wrote the next two songs we're going to sing. The focus of these songs is how Jesus made himself the sacrifice that saves us, and how beautiful that sacrifice is. How beautiful even just the news of that sacrifice. God commanded each Israelite family to sacrifice a lamb once a year at Passover in the temple. By the time Jesus came, they had a new temple. They called it Herod's temple. And the designers of that temple built a gutter from the altar out to the outside wall so that it could handle all of the thousands of lambs that would come in during Passover. Thousands of animals being slaughtered, and you can imagine how much blood would be involved. That channel was for the blood, to take it out of the city. And when Jesus walked out to the Mount of Olives each night to pray, when he would cross that valley, it's the Kidron Valley, when he would cross that valley, he would step down into a little creek down there, and that creek would have had the blood of those lambs in it. And so every night, and then of course the last night, when in the Garden of Gethsemane, he had his long night of prayer, he stepped into the blood of all those lambs that were being sacrificed, knowing that he would be the exclamation mark on all those years of all those lambs. No longer would we have to do that. We don't have to wait for a whole year to ask God's forgiveness. We get to live in God's forgiveness. We are in a constant state of grace. And so as we sing these next two songs, let's focus on the sacrifice that Jesus made. And as we commune with each other, we'll celebrate the fact that the juice that we're drinking represents the blood, not of all those thousands of lambs, millions over the centuries, but of the one Lamb of God.
No sin to hide, but you have sent him from your side to walk upon this guilty sod and to become the Lamb of God. Your gift of love they crucified, they laughed and scorned him as he died. The humble king they named a fraud and sacrificed the Lamb of God. O Lamb of God, sweet Lamb of God, I love the holy Lamb of God. Oh, wash me in his precious blood, my Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God. I was so lost, I should have died, but you have brought me to your side, to be led by your staff and rod, and to be called the Lamb of God. O Lamb of God, sweet Lamb of God, I love the holy Lamb of God. precious blood, my Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God. Oh, wash me in his precious blood, my Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God. How beautiful the hands that serve the wine and the bread, and the sons of the earth. How beautiful the feet that walk the long dusty roads, and the hill to the cross. How beautiful, how beautiful, how beautiful is the body of Christ. How beautiful the radiant bride who waits for her groom with his light in her eyes. How beautiful when humble hearts give the fruit of pure lives, so that others may live. How beautiful, how beautiful, how beautiful is the body of Christ. And as he laid down his life, we offer this sacrifice, that we might live just as he died, willing to pay the price, willing to pay the price. How beautiful the feet that bring the sound of good news and the love of the King. How beautiful the feet that serve the wine and the bread, and the sons of the earth. How beautiful, how beautiful, how beautiful is the body of Christ. At this time, Luke will come forward and present table talk for us to better give our minds and our hearts to the Lord's Supper that we're fixing to take.
There are a lot of good worship songs that are written today. And some of them have the same focus as our last song. But it seems like more songs about heaven were written in the past than are being written right now. I wonder, and I hope this doesn't sound cynical, but I wonder if that's because life was hard for a lot of people, especially people who lived in the Depression, children of the Depression, and heaven was something they longed for. And now, life's pretty good. And maybe we don't long for it like we should. Maybe we don't see the world for what it really is because we've been lured to sleep by the conveniences of our time. Again, I hope that doesn't sound cynical, and I hope it's not true, but I think there's some truth in it in my life, that I don't look forward to heaven maybe like my granddad did and his father, because this world was not their home. They were just passing through. Now, the man who wrote our last song lived in the late 1800s. His name was Johnson Oatman Jr., and he wrote over 3,000 hymns. So we're singing a song written by a guy who knew what he was doing when he wrote music. Now, this particular one focuses, I think it's twofold, actually. I think it focuses on heaven, but it also focuses on the fact that I'm not living in the muck that I used to live in, even now. I'm experiencing a taste of heaven right now as I live in this world. Our foundation, the foundation that is heaven, and the foundation that we're all on right now is not based on, well, we finally have enough money, we can relax, or we finally have reached that level of fame that we've been looking for, so we can relax, or we're all beautiful people, so we can relax. None of that is lasting, and we know that. But the foundation that we've been lifted to is higher than any of that. And so the higher ground that it's talking about, yes, I do believe it's talking about heaven, but I also believe there's a higher ground where we are right now. Now, while we're singing this, I want to challenge you. This is something that God's been working on me for the last couple of years to change. And the last several years, in fact, maybe a couple of decades would be more accurate. I've only awakened to the fact these last couple of years. But there is something in each one of us that is so universal, it's so deeply embedded that I think sometimes we don't even see it. It's that mindset that says there are two groups of people in this world. There's us and there's them. Them are doomed. Them are going to hell. We are saved. Now that's true, that we are saved. Yes, we have been rescued from hell. But there are not two groups of people that Jesus died for. There's one group of people. There's one race of people that Jesus died for, and that's the human race. Isaiah 57, I believe, we have all, like sheep, gone astray. Every one of us has sought our own way. Every one of us has tried to sit on that throne in our heart and has not yielded to God as often as we should. So as we're standing on this higher plane than the world, don't picture us higher than the people of the world. Because that's not the way it is. When God looks at us, he doesn't see two qualities of people. He sees one type of person, somebody who needs saving, somebody who's stuck in the muck of the promises Satan offered through beauty and fame and all the stuff that we try to pursue in this life. That's the kind of people we were. There are still people like that today. So as we're singing this song, it's a triumph song. It's a celebration of what God has done for us. But let's not look at it as triumph over other people. It's triumph over Satan and what Satan has been trying to do. And there are other people who need to be rescued as well. So as we are standing on this plane, let's keep in mind the people who are not here yet. Let's keep that attitude as we sing our last song.
I'm pressing on the upward way, new heights I'm gaining every day, still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand, my faith on heaven's table land, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. My heart has no desire to stay where doubts arise and fears dismay, though some may dwell where these abound. My prayer, my aim is higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand, my faith on heaven's table land, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to live above the world, though Satan's darts at me are hurled. For faith has called the joyful sound, the song of saints on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand, my faith on heaven's stable land, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to scale the utmost heights and catch a gleam of glory bright, but still I'll pray till heaven I found. Lord, plant my feet to higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand, my faith on heaven's table land, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground.
The last Sunday of this month is the 26th, and what we'd like to see on that day, we expect to have a smaller crowd. You can sit down if you want. We expect to have a smaller crowd that day, and we want to have a very intimate worship service. And what we would like to do is, instead of a sermon that day, to pass the mic to anyone who would like to share what God has been doing in your life. It could be something this year. It could be something recent He's helped you overcome. However He has been working in your life. The focus will be on Jesus, not on ourselves. But we get to share things that happened in our life. We had a man give a testimony Wednesday night in class that really enriched us, that changed the decisions later in the week of some people. Testimony will transform us if we let it, and if it's not about us, but if it's about God. So it's not bragging to say, I want to tell you something God helped me overcome in my life. That's testimony. That's sharing with another person, and that gives that person encouragement. So the last Sunday of this month, Sunday morning, we're going to meet in here, but it's going to be much more informal than a regular sermon would be, where one person's just talking. This is going to be the Spirit encouraging all of us through our voices. Men, women, children. We want everyone who has a testimony to share it. Okay? So that's the last Sunday of this month. You can stand now if you'd like. This is our closing prayer. God, we have made a little children's drawing this morning and have wrote on it to Daddy. We ask that you accept the gift of worship that we've given you. We've tied it up in a little bow and we've presented it to you. Hear our hearts, God, because that's where the worship really is. And we thank you. We thank you for what you did through Jesus, what you did to save us from certain death. And we long to join Lydia as she's already celebrating with you in heaven. We long to join those who have gone on, those who we've lost this year, to join them in heaven, celebrating you and honoring you, not just in faith, but in face to face. We cannot wait for that, God, and we long for that day. We love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. 1, 2, 3. Check, check. Yeah, I think I'm good. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start a little early and dismiss a little early. How about that? So you get an extra good seat at the restaurant of your choice. All right, let's see. If I go back, what happens? I bet this isn't even on. All right, somebody smarter than me has to show me how to turn this on. Anybody know how to turn the remote on? Oh, there it is. That's that. I was looking on the wrong side. Thank you. Yeah. Get the wrong side of the bed. I was on the wrong side of the remote. All right. So this class, I think everybody's pretty much been in this class. Just in case anybody hasn't, what we do in this class is we take a look at a Bible character and then a person from church history to emphasize one aspect of being a Christian, like what it means to follow Christ. So our focus is not, our focus is on Christ. We use a person in the Bible and a person in church history to help us get there. They act as witnesses for us, to help guide us to Christ. And that's why I always begin with this passage from Hebrews. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So the writer of Hebrews had been talking about people from their history and how all of that acts as a witness or witnesses. It's picture a stadium of all these people from the past, and they're all cheering us on as we run our race. And eventually we'll join the people in the stadium unless Christ comes back first. We'll join them in the stadium, and we'll cheer on the next group of people that are running the race. So the cloud of witnesses includes two people that we're going to talk about today. That's how this class works. The focus that we're going to have today is unconditional surrender to Jesus. What that means when you really do surrender your life to Christ. This passage from Mark chapter 8. He called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it." Jesus is drawing a line in the sand here. Now, just before this moment, Jesus revealed to the 12 apostles, that he would eventually be crucified. And Peter said, "Oh, I'll save you, I'll save you." And Jesus said, "I don't need saving from the cross. You don't get it. That's not the point. In fact, every day I decide to yield to my Father's will. And in fact, every day you're going to have to decide to yield to God's will. And every day you're going to have to pick up your cross and follow me." Picking up your cross and carrying it each day. There have been people who literally carry a cross, and they do kind of a trek across the world. And that drives the image home. It's not a bad idea. But if you really want to get at the heart of what Jesus is saying here, let me go back to Luke. He's saying, what is going on? Okay, I've got him out of order for some reason. What he's saying is, you've got to pick up your cross daily. You've got to decide daily, I'm going to kill that old man again. I know he's going to come trying to get me, but I'm going to... You've got to decide that each morning as you get up. Tim Allen used to joke, when I get up in the morning, I apologize to my wife first thing, and then the rest of the day is okay. Well, every day you have, as a Christian, as a follower of Christ, you have to get up knowing that even though you killed him yesterday, that old self is coming back. He's like a zombie. He wants to eat your brain, and he wants to make it his again. But you've got to keep that cross with you, and you've got to crucify your old self every single day. Surrendering your will to God's will means killing your old self. That's what it means to be a Christian. Now, there are too many people who define being a Christian simply by what you believe. Like, you're a Republican? Okay, tell me what you think about this issue. Oh, you're a Democrat? Tell me what you think about this issue. Oh, you work with plumbing. Tell me what you think about this issue. Okay, so it's based on your knowledge of things, right? Well, a lot of people approach Christianity the same way, and I hear this a lot. You're a Christian? Well, tell me what you think about this issue. And okay, I have my opinion, but that's really all it is. It's just an opinion. That's not what it means to be a Christian. Being a Christian is not just what goes on up here. This is part of it, to be sure, but that's not the definition of it. This is where it is. This is where your real devotion, your real commitment, your unconditional surrender to Christ is, and where it should be. So a lot of times, again, maybe I'm just in a cynical mood this morning, but a lot of times when people come to you and say, what do you think about this issue, Christian? They're waiting. You know, it's a bait and switch. They know you're going to say something, and they've got the comeback for you. You know, and you're an intolerant hypocrite, and there, I just proved it. You're kind of almost at a lose-lose fork in the road. Well, what did Jesus do? What did he ever get approached by people who were saying, what about this issue? Yes, he did. What do you think about paying taxes to Caesar? What do you think about divorce? What do you think about 100 questions of the day, issues, headlines? And in every case, Jesus showed them there's something deeper going on than just what you think about this issue. There's something more at stake than just the side that you're on. So if you ever get hit with the question, and it may come from your own extended family at holidays, they may say, I understand you're a Christian. Tell me what you think about, the Supreme Court right now is meeting about Roe versus Wade. That topic may well come up, or capital punishment, same-sex marriage, divorce, Democrat, Republican, who's right, the vaccine. There's 100 issues of the day that you could get mired down in. But we're not in that muck and mire anymore. A Christian must first and foremost surrender his will to God. So when you crucify yourself daily, like Jesus said in Luke, you've got a new boss. He will tell you what to think, what to believe. He will guide you in that way. He will show you those things. If he hasn't made it clear yet, say, God hasn't made that clear yet to me. I don't know. I'm still waiting on what he tells me. Okay? You don't have to have an answer right away for every single debate that's out there. It's okay to wait on the Lord. That's the only way he will renew your strength, in fact. Now, this boss that we have, God, this guide who leads us in these lessons, believe it or not, he gives them to us every day. And believe it or not, they're not always from one person standing up front telling you what to believe. Most lessons God gives us are from something that happened with a little kid, or a sunset, or a TV show, or a commercial for a bank that's opening. There can be something that happens, and God will turn a little switch in your brain and says, now, connect that to something that happened earlier. That was a seed. This is fertilizer. And we're going to grow that plant now in you. But only for the students who are teachable. You ask any teacher, the hardest person to teach is the one who is unteachable. You can't teach me anything. Well, it's the attitude, it's the mindset that says, I already know everything. I don't need to be taught. So the idea that we have to figure everything out right now just in case we're asked about it, that puts us in a very dangerous position with God. That puts us in a position that says, like Nicodemus, my dry erase board's all full. You don't have any room to write up there because I've got all the answers written up there. We need to take that eraser out and say, God, do some writing on my dry erase board. So when that question comes up, your question, what do you think about blank? Fill in the question. They're asking the wrong question, really. When you follow Jesus, your opinion doesn't matter anymore. In fact, it never did, to be honest. The only thing that matters is what God thinks. Now, there is a way to figure these things out. Yes, I'm not saying there's not an answer to these issues. And God knows all those answers. And he'll reveal them, some of them, to you. But when a person comes to Jesus, he can have no other agenda other than absolute surrender. Now, it's a tough lesson. But Jesus is the one that drew that line. I didn't draw that line. But we've been given many examples, our cloud of witnesses, of men and women who have surrendered every part of their old selves when they followed Jesus. This is the section of the cloud of witnesses we're going to focus on today. Now, always, the best example, of course, is Jesus. We could use Jesus for every one of these lessons. But I like taking failed humans who have themselves not been perfect, and so we can relate to that. And look at their lives, and it may just be one lesson that we can get from their lives, but we can learn from their example in this. And so the two people we'll look at today are Zacchaeus and Martin of Tours. All right, Zacchaeus. Somebody read the first 10 verses of Luke chapter 19, please. Okay, Jericho was a very ancient city. In fact, it's said that Jericho is the oldest city that's been continuously, or mostly continuously, inhabited in archaeology. It's on one of the heaviest traveled roads that lead to Jerusalem. And it's also under curse. You remember who spoke the curse? You can... Who spoke the curse of Jericho? Who was the one who said, Jericho will be under a curse if anybody rebuilds it? Joshua, yeah. The one who fit the battle of Jericho. You remember that? He's the one who said, okay, we're giving this city to God. Now, we may kind of stumble a bit at that. What was going on there? Basically, because this isn't the focus of this lesson, when Israel marched into the promised land, the first city they came to was Jericho, and it was destroyed. Now, they could have rebuilt it and had a pretty good headquarters to work from. Okay? But Joshua said, let's give it to God. Let's trust that he will provide the headquarters we need. And if anybody rebuilds this city, it'll be at the cost of two of his sons. And later in history, the Old Testament tells us somebody did rebuild the city, and it was at the cost of two of his sons, exactly like the curse said. So Jericho really wasn't supposed to be anything more than a pile of rubble. And there we see Jesus ignoring one of the possible topics of his day right there. I mean, what Jesus didn't say is as important as what he did say. He didn't go in there and say, all you people living in Jericho, don't you remember what Joshua said? You should get out of this place. He didn't say any of that because he knew there was something more important to be taken care of that day. And I believe it was something God told him to do specifically that day. So when Jesus went to Jericho, he was on his way to somewhere else, but he knew that night he was supposed to stay at the house of Zacchaeus. Now, did you notice he didn't have to ask his name when he said, hey, Zacchaeus? Well, he was Jesus. I mean, he knew, everybody had a name tag for Jesus, possibly. But remember what he said to the man who had the legion of demons? What is your name? So I don't think he did have a name tag for everybody. I think he knew exactly what God told him. And I think God told him, you need to stay at the house of a man named Zacchaeus. He's a little bitty guy. You can't miss him. He'll be up in a tree. You'll see him. Okay? And so when he went, he said, hey, Zacchaeus, I need to stay at your house today. And I think he said it that way because God had said, you need to stay at his house today. And so he was obeying his father's will. So, okay, in volleyball where they do the bump, set, spike, I'm going to attempt that here with a little question. What do we know about Zacchaeus? He was a wee little man. Thank you. That was my spike. Okay. He was a tax collector, yes. Okay. Now, he was very rich. How did he get rich? Off of other people. What kind of people? Jewish people, his own people. Y'all are carpenters this morning, hitting those nails on the head. Zacchaeus was, and no Jew would have argued with this back then, the chief of sinners. He was not only working for the enemy, which was the Roman Empire. It wasn't Satan, it was the Roman Empire. See? He was not only working for the enemy, he was a tax collector. And he wasn't just a tax collector, he was the boss, the head tax collector. And not just in any town. This was a hub city that was under a curse. So you couldn't get much lower than this guy who was living in luxury while his Jewish kinsmen were struggling to make ends meet. And they looked up at his house and every day just cursed him. How can you do this to us, your own brothers and sisters? So how is it that, Jesus hasn't even preached a sermon. All of a sudden, Zacchaeus can give up everything he has. How is that? I think just being in his presence is inspiring, intimidating, maybe a little fearful, and enough maybe to inspire you to do that. But I think it's more than that. I think there's something going on here that maybe we miss because we're not in that culture. Jesus may have been the first person who talked to Zacchaeus that day. In fact, for a long time. Yeah. Jesus treated him like an equal. Not only that, but you have something I need. Can you help me? I need to stay at your house. I need a place to stay tonight, and you're the guy that it needs to be. Can you imagine what that did for Zacchaeus? I mean, people say it's lonely at the top. I wouldn't know, but I'm going to take their word for it. But, yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, you work hard to get all this wealth, and then all of a sudden you've got all this wealth, and you realize people are going to make me a target now because I have all this wealth. They're going to sue me for everything. So I've got to hire lawyers to protect my wealth. And life doesn't get simpler for you. Your security is not any better than it was before. In fact, it's worse because now you're worrying about your wealth all the time. Well, Zacchaeus must have been lonely. He's been stealing from his brothers. But in truth, he really is a poor man. We're remodeling one of our bathrooms, and the plumber was there on Friday. And I forgot how the topic came up about wealth. And I said, but we really are wealthy. And he said, yeah, we have our families, we have people that love us. We are wealthy. And I thought that was a really neat connection that he made there for a plumber. Nothing against plumbers, but I heard his language the rest of the day. But that's real wealth. When you consider your friends, your family, and Zacchaeus was dirt poor in that area. Now, this celebrity from Galilee has not only noticed him, he's honored him publicly. I keep pointing up there like Zacchaeus was 30 feet up in the air. I don't think it was that. I think it was just a little above the others. But no doubt the people assumed, okay, he knew his name because he's the big bad guy here, but he probably doesn't know his history, so we'll forgive Jesus that. But my goodness, staying at his house, that's going a little beyond what I'm comfortable with. He's a little outside my comfort zone. We've never done it that way before. And the gossip is flying. How can Jesus be a holy man? He's staying with sinners. They don't even deserve our time. You know that us-them mindset I was talking about earlier? It's not clear whether Zacchaeus made that big declaration about what he was going to do with his money while he was in the tree or while they were behind closed doors. I personally think it was right up there in that sycamore fig. Everybody heard it, and I think that's the fact that they were still gossiping about him afterwards proves they didn't buy it for a minute. He just said that to please Jesus. Well, I'd like to think he did mean it. I think he did go through with it because Jesus saw his heart. And he said, today salvation has come to this man's house. All right? So he said, I'm going to give away half of everything I own. Why just half? You ever thought about that? Why not everything? I mean, that's what he told the rich young ruler. Well, it's a very practical answer, actually. Remember the second part of his promise? I'll pay back anybody I've cheated 4 times what I owe them. He's going to have money to do that. That's his other half. Okay? He's given his half of what he has to the poor. The people he hadn't even taxed because they don't have enough. But the other half, he's going to make restitution. Now, he probably isn't going to have much when all that's said and done. In fact, he'll probably have to change where he lives, his standard of living, his whole life, not just in following Jesus, but I mean, how he lives life is going to change. He's not going to have the dish up on top anymore. He's going to have to go to United, once a month instead of once a week. It's going to change a lot of things. And he's going to be one of those people that, well, he actually gave half of his money to. So, yeah. Well, now that's an interesting question because the Romans didn't care how much you overcharge anybody as long as you give them what's due. So yes, he could have still been a tax collector, but he would have to only charge what is fair, which is what John the Baptist said to tax collectors. Only charge what is fair. Now, because he was the chief tax collector, that means the people under him were also going to have to charge only what is fair. And I can imagine a bunch of them move to another town because that's going to change their standard of living, and that's not going to go over very well. You know, he said he's going to repay fourfold. There's a little Jewish, I don't usually go into this much detail, but I found this really interesting. According to the law of Moses, if one man robs another in a violent way, you have to pay back 4 times what you robbed that person, okay? If it was just a regular robbery, there's no violence involved, and say the original goods weren't even there anymore, he's already spent it, somehow he's going to have to repay what he stole plus an equal amount for stealing it in the first place. So double, okay? If you rob somebody and you confess it and you offer, okay, I will pay him back, then you pay him back what you stole plus a fifth, okay, just to say, I'm really sorry that I did that. But 4 times, that's for violent robbery. That's the worst of the robberies. Zacchaeus was truly a changed man. I mean, he went for the death penalty as far as his old self goes, which is really what we all should be doing, as we said, you know, daily by picking up our cross. So, Zacchaeus, if he really is the changed man, and I do believe he was, he has found the pearl of great price. And he said, I'm willing to give up everything just for that, just for what you are. I want to be where you are. I want to have what you have. I give up all this. I recognize instantly that this is wrong. And maybe God's been working on him for a while. I think probably he had. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, what to do with your money. Yeah, I think that's a good reason for why it happened that way. And, you know, in my convictions, I try not to read too much into the scene and everything. But in my imagining of the story, yeah, my imagination loves to build the scene. And, yeah, I've got things in there that shouldn't be in there. You know, they didn't have electricity, David. You know, he wasn't with a street light out there. But I do put things in there just to help it be more real to me. It's real, but I don't want it to be in the same category of Once Upon a Time. You know, I don't want this to just be a fairy tale. This really happened. I've been telling Chloe, our granddaughter, bedtime stories, and they're all stories about Jesus. And I always start with, this really happened. And then I just, you know, on her level, kind of tell a story that talks about something that happened. This change, this unconditional surrender, this surrender that says, I don't hold anything back. It's a reckless sacrifice. It is a radical change. That kind of sacrifice is what we're focusing on this morning. And we're going to take a look at someone in church history here in just a minute who made that kind of sacrifice. But before I do, I want us to take one last look at something in this story about Zacchaeus' sacrifice. Just 2 little words. What are the last 2 words of this text? The first one is the. Lost. The lost. It's a word that people would use this word in their daily speech just to talk about something that has been lost. Well, back then, the word that they actually used is a word that describes something that has been totally destroyed. It's not usable anymore. So I just want us to have a little meditation here, a little moment for some introspection at this point. Be honest. When you hear the term the lost, what kind of image do you have? I will be honest, as I was during the sermon. I too often have an us-them image. Okay? I was raised in the church. That's how we say it. I was raised in the church. I was one of the saved. Okay? So I can only speak from the perspective of someone who's had that history. It may well be that those who came to Christ as adults really don't think this way. They don't have this problem. And if so, please teach us. Help us to know how to not have this perspective. But those of us who have grown up in Christianity too often have bought into the mindset that there's really two qualities of people, the low and the high, and I'm one of the high. It's that old me, that old mindset. Now, thank God I am saved. I am one of the saved. And I'm not saying that those people are not lost. But when I think of people who are the lost, I think of it in terms of those who not only are damned, but that's a permanent state. They're never going to change. They can't be changed. Those who face an eternity of damnation look at those who are saved, and I know this because I've heard many of them say this, as hypocrites, because we think we're better than they are. If we think we're better than they are, then they're right. We are hypocrites. Because we also, like sheep, have gone astray. When Jesus thought of those who were lost, he didn't condemn them in a sweep of his hand and say, they're gone, let's focus on us. He was looking at them like I look at my remote control at home when I can't find it. It's lost. It's not where it's supposed to be, on the arm of my chair. That's where it's supposed to be. I need to go to work in the morning. I can't find my keys. Oh my goodness, I always put them right there. How can they not be right there? But I'm not going anywhere until I find them and restore them to where they're supposed to be. That's how Jesus saw the lost. Not as people who were eternally damned and there's nothing you can do about it, but as people who have been destroyed, but they need to be renewed. They need to be fixed. They need to be back at home in the place where they were designed to be. The sooner I can begin seeing lost people, as Jesus does, as people who are not yet at home, the sooner I'll be able to stop thinking of these two categories, us and them. Okay, yeah, James. Wait, there are too many negatives in that. There's nothing my remote can do. Say that again in the microphone and use positives if you can. It's not on. I think everything was muted when services were over, so Terry's going to make our lost microphone found.
1, 2, 3.
There you go. Thank you,
Okay.
Terry.
There is nothing your remote can do. What did I say?
About not being
About not being
where it's
on the
supposed
arm
to be.
of your chair.
Yeah, right by David.
You have to find that remote and save it and
Right.
bring it back to the arm of your chair.
That's exactly right. It's not up to the remote to replace itself. Yeah. Right. Good. And that is such an important point. That's why at our house, see, I use that image because everybody can relate to it, but at our house, Sally's already shaking her head, our remote has an anchor. It's tied to a couch pillow, and it's not going anywhere. So, yes, at our house, and it finds its way down between the chair thing every time. And I just pull it back up with the pillow. So anyway, so yeah, thank you, Sally, for that look. It just made too much sense. So anyway, that mentality of seeing the big picture, there's one category of people. That mentality, that concern for others, that's a great segue into our next member of the cloud of witnesses that we're going to take a look at this morning. A man by the name of Martin of Tours. On the timeline, he died in about 392. We're so far in the past that even now, several lessons in, we're still coming across people. We're not exactly sure, the dates. But that doesn't matter. The important thing is he was born toward the beginning of the 300s and died toward the end. Okay, so he grew up in that century. This was the century when Christianity was legalized. And he watched how what it meant to be a Christian was evolving as the church began to experience some newfound freedom. Toward the end of his life, he watched as Christianity went from it's now legal to be a Christian, it's your choice, but it's legal to be a Christian, to being the official governmental choice. Christianity is the official religion of the empire now. That happened in the lifetime of Martin. Like Zacchaeus, Martin of Tours was a man who was so moved by his relationship with Jesus that he was happy to sacrifice everything he had for his Lord. I hope when you leave class this morning, you're encouraged to follow in the footsteps of these witnesses and sacrifice everything that you have to the work of the Lord. Let everything in your life be about God. So we call him Martin of Tours because ultimately he became the third bishop of the church in the French city of Tours. He didn't live there when he was a kid. When he was a kid, he was just Martin, that kid across the street. His father was a tribune in the Roman army. Now, you've got your soldiers, and then you've got the centurion who's, over a group of soldiers. It's not actually 100, but anyway. And then you've got tribunes who are above the centurions. So we're pretty high up here. We're getting into nobility at this level. And so he was actually born wealthy. And also he enjoyed a lot of power. Well, his family enjoyed a lot of power relative to the others. Now, Christianity was legalized when Martin was born, okay? But not everybody in the empire, it's not Christendom yet, not everybody in the empire followed Emperor Constantine's lead and became a Christian right away. The growth of Christianity, it was stronger in the cities than it tended to be out in the country. In fact, the Latin word that they used back then for country dweller was pagan. That's where we get that word. And so it just means an old bumpkin out there. Well, it took the meaning of somebody who still follows those old pagan ways, those old God-worshiping ways, God's worshiping ways. But Martin was born in the city, although neither of his parents really were Christians. Martin started going to a local Christian church when he was 10 years old, even though mom and dad said, that's not going to do you any good. Yeah, I know everybody's going that way, but this is a fad, it'll pass. And they tried to encourage him not to go, but he was really moved and he wanted to be a Christian. Well, kids of military officers at that time were expected to serve at least some time in the ranks. And it's not clear how long Martin served in the ranks, but he did enter the military. And so as a Christian, a follower of Christ, Martin joined the military, and because he was of nobility, he was automatically placed in what's called the auxiliary cavalry. I have to stop every time I say that word. The guys on horses, okay? Now they're on helicopters, but the cavalry, and it's the auxiliary, which, if I'm saying that right, auxiliary. I think that's right. Is that right? Auxiliary? Okay, all right. The auxiliary cavalry, that. they were the high cavalry, the ones that escorted the emperor when he was going through the empire on his tours. Has nothing to do with the town he eventually moved to. His unit, even though they were surrounded by Christians, his unit was mostly made up of what we would call pagans, and Martin was baptized at some point while he was a soldier. He had a couple of years left of service. There was one time in the winter, and remember, he's of the mindset now, like Zacchaeus, I have surrendered completely to God. And there's one time in the winter, they were going up, I'm going to butcher these names, Amiens in northern France. It was Gaul back then, but anyway, a little town, okay? They were going up either into that city or past it, and he saw a beggar at the gate who was wearing very little, and it was bitter, bitter cold that day. Well, Martin had what they all had, which was a big cloak, nice red cloak. And when you see pictures of Martin, of tours in medieval paintings, you'll usually see this scene. And he cut it in half, and he gave half of it to this nobody, this them, okay, because he was cold. The other soldiers laughed at him for the rest of the week. He was like the butt of the joke. Hey, did you hear the one about, well, that really happened, you know? And they couldn't believe anybody would do something stupid like that. I mean, this guy he could be poor because of his own choices. And you just helped and aided and abetted somebody that lost his own fortune. That night, though, in a dream, Martin saw Jesus saying to him, or saying about him, Martin, though only a student, has clothed me. And he remembered that lesson that he had heard in Bible class about Jesus saying, whatever you did for one of the least of these, you did for me. Well, at age 20, he could no longer tolerate being in the military, surrounded by pagans. The emperor, Constantine, you know, the guy that made Christianity legal, he was no longer emperor. He had died. His son, Constantine II, was moving toward paganism. He only lasted 3 years, by the way. But he wanted to restore the old gods, bring back the old ways. And that really bothered Martin, that he was working for, ultimately, and escorting around the empire this pagan, this man who was worshiping other gods. And finally, he could tolerate it no more. He went to his CO, and he said, I can't work for this man anymore. I just can't do it. I'm a soldier of Christ. I'm not a soldier of this pagan. Well, his CO said, I get it, but isn't it a coincidence? Because we're about to go up, this is the eve of a big battle that we have against barbarians here in Germany. And now suddenly you want to find religion. He said he was a coward. And he was going to put him in prison. You know, he deserved the death penalty for cowardice. But he was a son of nobility, and so he's going to give him a little break there. Martin said, I'm not a coward. I'll prove it. I'll march as a soldier of Christ in this battle. I'll be out front. But as a soldier of Christ, I won't need a sword. I'll go as I am. And the CO agreed. I think he probably decided, well, then the barbarians will provide the death penalty that I should have been giving you in the first place. Well, Martin lived because that battle never took place. Before the battle even began, the barbarians sued for peace, and there was no battle. Now, the CO was moved by that. He recognized this man is not a coward. He really was out there, and he really was going to march, and he really didn't have a sword. So he allowed him to leave the military. So Martin went back to his parents, and he lived with them for a while. He tried to convert both of them, didn't have any luck with his dad, but he did convert his mom to Christianity. In the day, there was a teaching called Arianism. And again, this is outside the focus of this class, but you do need to know a little bit about it. Arianism, it's a teaching that crossed centuries in church history. And it basically says Jesus and God are different people. God created Jesus, so at one point Jesus didn't exist. Martin taught that was wrong. He said there's no way that can be true. And he went to book, chapter, and verse to prove it. But unfortunately, Arian teachers at that time were enjoying some political power right there in the region of France where Martin was. And so Martin was publicly whipped for going against what was doctrine. So once all that was over, he decided, I just need to get away. I need to get with just God, me and God. God, I need you to strengthen me. And so he went out, like the hermits that we've heard about going out to the desert. He went to an island and became a hermit. Well, Arian power diminished over time, and Martin moved back to France. And he moved into an abandoned Roman bathhouse. It was just a shell. And it was in Tours at that time. And over the next few years, more Christians who had heard about Martin and who were moved by the story of him cutting his cloak and had heard about his courage and his stories had kind of spread there locally, they wanted to be his students, okay, his disciples. That's not that they worshiped him, that's that they learned from him. They were just students. Well, that eventually, that shell of a structure became a monastery. And it's, here we go again, the Benedictine Legouge Monastery. It's the Benedictine Legouge Abbey. It's the oldest Christian monastery in Europe. Okay, it's still there. So he developed quite a following of disciples, and his reputation spread throughout France. The only reason he was living there, though, was because he wanted to give everything to God. He did not want to be a rich and famous man, but he was becoming a famous man. Now, it was at this time when a Christian's commitment was being measured by how much he had sacrificed. You remember Mary, the one who went out to the desert, Harry Mary, okay? For those who weren't here, I'll explain after class. She gave up everything she had, and the monk that found her said, you're more righteous than I because you've given up everything. Okay, that was seen as kind of a measurement of how righteous you were. People made that mistake even in this time. And I think what Martin wanted more than anything was to be able to give it up without people thinking he was more righteous than anybody else because of the way he constantly interacted with people and the way he treated them. The church there in Tours recognized the righteousness of Martin, and they begged him, come pray for one of our sick members. They're very sick, and we need you to come pray. Well, Martin did, and the man was healed, and the people of Tours didn't let Martin go back home. They wanted him there as their pastor, their bishop. Martin begged them, please, I just want to get back to the simple life. I really don't want, but they refused. No, you're going to stay here. So he finally agreed to serve as their bishop. If he could just be allowed to live in his hut, then the people agreed. And so in a time when Christian leaders were beginning to get a real taste for political power that comes from being a Christian and a Christian celebrity, Martin lived the rest of his life seeking anonymity and it constantly eluding him. Ironically, the more Martin tried to flee it, the more his popularity grew. And the stories about him abound. Again, you can read them for yourself. Just, Martin of Tours. Wikipedia has an article about him. Some of them are miraculous. Some of them are really moving. I encourage you to look at these lives. Again, where the tablecloth ends and the lace begins, you have to kind of decide for yourself. But even if it's all true, or if even if it's all not true, it's encouraging to see somebody with this attitude. And it doesn't matter to me the historicity of these stories. What matters to me is the attitude of these people. So that's Martin of Tours. Both Zacchaeus and Martin of Tours gave up their wealth when they followed Jesus. So here's where we begin the last phase of our class, which I promised we'd let out early because we've got teachers that are going to need their kids relieved at some point. Both Zacchaeus and Martin gave up their wealth. When a person becomes a monk or a nun, they give up their wealth. They take a vow of poverty. They often point to this story of Zacchaeus as book, chapter, and verse for why you should give up your wealth if you're seeking to follow Jesus. And they point to the rich young ruler. Jesus said to the rich young ruler, first of all, get rid of everything, turn everything that you have into money, and then give that money to the poor. So my question that I would like for you to discuss here, and whoever has the microphone can take it to the next person. Do you think surrendering your will includes surrendering your wealth? If not, what does a surrender of your will mean if you have wealth? And we all have wealth. We all have food in our pantry. That puts us above about 80% of the world right now. Okay, so what do we do with our wealth, I guess, is the question, if we're really committed to a total surrender to Jesus? All right, who would like to make a comment on that? I'm glad you're thinking about it. Or maybe it's fear.
Years ago that we had a special guest speaker. We had him several times, Earl the Pearl Williams.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget one of the things that he shared. We were going to sing the song, I Surrender All. And he said it's just as much a sin to sing something as it is to say something if it's not true about you. And he really provoked us. Do you surrender all? And so, yeah, I'm still repenting over that and still, seeking God that we truly do. And when we think about how everything we have, everything we own, it's only because of the goodness of God. Our houses, our families, our cars, our very breath, our lives. So I think just like you said, not us and them, having that sense of humility and total dependence on Him, but seeking God. Lord, I'm sorry I have not been as humble as I should have been, and recognizing that you are the goodness of my life, and help me to surrender all. So I think that means different things for different people, and hopefully we can be very conscious and learn more to depend on the Spirit. If He says, give this away to that person, if we encounter somebody, or if we hear about a charitable work, there are so many awesome charities throughout the world, and trying to discern what is the best use of our time, efforts, resources, homes, everything we have should be surrendered, and just totally, continuously seeking God's will and how to use our resources.
Okay.
You were talking about the plumber and being rich. I thought too about how we take for granted clean water. Having lived in a third world country, back when we lived in Indonesia, most of the people lived in huts with dirt floors. They had no running water, no bathroom. They would go to a community bathroom, and they would basically dig a hole, and depending on what you were going to do when you were there, it depended on if you went to this one or that one. So, yeah, we
Wow.
take so much for granted. We cannot even imagine. We lived like rich people, and we had a cook and a maid and a driver. The driver was also our gardener, tremendous. We loved them so deeply. But every day he had big water jugs. He would get some of our clean water. We lived in a housing complex.
Mhm.
We had clean water. He would take water from home every day for his wife and his 2 little girls. Well, one day he came to me desperately asked if he could borrow the vehicle to drive the little girl into the hospital in town because our local clinic would not allow him to take his little girl who was desperately ill. And she passed away that night of dysentery because of lack of clean
Clean
water.
water. Oh, my goodness.
Uh,
You know, the people in Africa, South Africa, who are suffering with this new strain of Omicron, it's because they couldn't be vaccinated. They didn't have enough vaccines over there. We've got so many that, they're having to throw them away because people aren't using them. And we have sent some to third world countries, but there are people all over the world who are dying of COVID because they don't have access like we do. We are very, very wealthy in this country. Could you say it in the mic?
I had a patient tell me that he was lucky to get it. He had family in other countries that you only get the vaccine if you're wealthy.
Oh.
And I don't think people realize the luxury here we're just giving away.
Right.
I
And
mean,
over
we're
there
paying
they
for
buy
our
it.
taxes eventually,
Yeah.
the economy, but really anybody and everybody can get it.
Yeah. And over there you have to basically buy it.
Yeah, and so he had a lot of families die. Family members, I think he said at least 2 because they didn't have
Yeah.
the money to pay for it.
And I know this has got to hit the black market because this is a way for them to make money, and there's all kinds of corruption that leaves many people poor. We're not poor, but does it mean, Craig, does it mean that we give up our money? And if so, what does that look like?
Jodan was just mentioning, we're in Rotary, and we do water wells
Mhm.
for places. But, our missionaries in India, no water wells. So
Yeah.
it's a big issue.
It is. And we have actually funded a water well through Mark McCormick and that family in India. But go ahead, James.
I just had a couple of points. At the end of World War II, Japan surrendered unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
They gave it all up.
Yeah.
And today they're one of the richest countries in the world.
It's true. When you think about, since the beginning of their history, they had an emperor, Japan. The emperor was viewed as the son of the god, the moon god in their case, but the god that looked over Japan. When Hirohito surrendered unconditionally, he said, "I am not the son of a god." That's what he was saying. He was saying, we've bit off more than we can chew here, and we lost. So I have failed my people. But even though they're not a Christian nation, God has blessed that nation and has used them as an example of, if you're a seed and you want to grow into something beautiful, die. Allow yourself to die. God will grow you into something you would have never been able to achieve yourself as a seed on a shelf. So that's really what it means to sacrifice your wealth. Yeah.
My other thought was that total surrender does not necessarily mean giving everything away.
Okay.
It means making it available. If we all took everything out of our pantries and brought them down here to put it in the church pantry, seems to me like more often than not, when someone comes looking for help here at church, here at Eastside, they come on weekends. And there's nobody even here to answer the door.
And James would know, because as deacon who's connected with benevolence, then he gets a lot of these calls.
But if we all go ahead and stock our pantries, but make it available when somebody needs something.
Yeah.
That's still I surrender.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just our wealth of money. It's our wealth of time. It's our wealth of ability. We've each been given a talent. And being known as the kind of person who is willing to help someone when they are in need, that is surrendering what we have, the wealth that we've been given, to God. All right, I promised that I'd let y'all out early. Promised the teachers I'd let y'all out early. So, because we ended worship a little early, so we're done. Thank you, Craig.